Well, I'm back from my cruise vacation, and a lot has happened since I've been gone. I'll break down everything I missed on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. From brake parts to exhaust kits and beyond, eBay Motors has over 122 million parts to keep your ride or die alive. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to bring home that big win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's guaranteed fit is only available to U.S. customers. Well, I got to say, some mixed emotions when it comes to what happened this weekend for the New York Mets. I was on a cruise, a lot of you know, and I was in the dark for a little bit. I eventually did get the Wi-Fi plan on my cruise because it was my wife's birthday on Sunday. Wanted to make sure she could talk to some people like her mom back home while we were away. And so that was my opportunity for the last 24 hours to catch up on everything that had happened with the Mets. And prior to that, I did get a score update or two, and that was old school. I mean, I was back to when I was a kid, those old days that I'm sure some of the younger listeners of the show don't even know about, where you follow the ticker at the bottom of ESPN to get a score update. That's what I lived on at the beginning there. I was like, oh, the Mets keep winning. That's great. Didn't realize until I got the Wi-Fi that they lost at a cost, which was that Francisco Alvarez had torn a ligament in his thumb and is out for a while. So we're going to talk about the Alvarez loss, as well as Brooks Raley going on the IL, JD Martinez update. We'll get to all of that in the next segment. But let's stay on the positive side of things. What a team that the Mets have here to go into LA and to win the first two games against a tough Dodgers team. Granted, the Dodgers haven't really gotten rolling this year, but anytime where you have to go up against a team that has a lineup where it's Mookie Betts to Shohei Ohtani to Freddie Freeman, and you can come out of that and win a couple of games, that's pretty awesome. And game one, to see what the Mets did, I mean, that was the one that really impressed me from the ticker box score, because I see, wow, the Mets put up 9 runs, and then you see Francisco Lindor, a little note there, a late home run to give the Mets a lead. Find out that home run did come from the left side. So awesome stuff. And you look throughout the game, DJ Stewart continues to hit. Wonder how he's going to see his playing time dinged when JD Martinez comes up. You got to keep DJ Stewart in the lineup, so he might be playing some outfield. Who knows how the Mets are going to try to make all of that work. Harrison Bader goes 4 for 5 in that first game. Sean Manaea, solid enough start, gives up 2 runs on 4 hits, 3 walks, 3 strikeouts, gets through 5. Reed Garrett ends up giving up a couple of unearned runs because Joey Wendell makes some errors. What's going on there? Watch the highlights, man. Is Wendell going to be the roster casualty? I kind of think he should be. If you want to have another right-handed bat on the bench when Martinez comes up, you keep Zach Short. Maybe you DFA Joey Wendell. He has not played well. Zach Short certainly can fill that utility role, filling in a bunch of positions on the infield. And DJ Stewart, instead of Wendell being your lefty off the bench offensively, DJ Stewart can stick around and be the left-handed bat. So, just an interesting note that Wendell made a couple of errors. Lindor, like I mentioned, clutch home run from the left side. He went 5 for 12 in this series with 4 RBIs. So to see him heat up, and particularly from the left side, really great. He had an RBI double in the first inning of game 2 from the left side. And Jose Budo, I talked about that one heading into this series as well. How is Budo going to hold up going against a Dodgers team? And to look through what happened in this game, to watch the highlights, man, unbelievable first couple of innings. Like 5 strikeouts, 5 walks, 1 earned run through 2 innings. We need somebody from like the Baseball Almanac or whatever to try to go through how many times in history that one's happened. But I'm sure it's pretty rare to see a pitcher strike out 5, walk 5, and only give up 1 earned on 5 walks. So that was pretty impressive. I mean, he settled in, had a couple of perfect innings in the middle there in the 3rd and 4th inning. 5th inning, gives up a leadoff double to Ohtani. No shame there, hits a batter. Ends up getting pulled at 95 pitches. but not a bad start for Jose Butto. 4 and a third, 3 hits allowed, 2 earned, 5 walks, 6 strikeouts. I think it's continuing to be clear here that Butto is right now the Mets' 4th best starter in this rotation. I mean, you can make an argument maybe he's better than a guy like Manaea just based on the early results, but we know that Quintana, Severino, Manaea, they're not going anywhere. I think Butto's here to stay, and I think really the question more is on Adrian Hauser, who we'll talk about a little bit more in the next segment, because he got shelled in this series and gave up a ton of runs on Sunday, which led to the one loss of the series where the Mets end up dropping it 10-0. I mentioned going into that series in the preview that Tyler Glasnow was going to be tough, and he was tough on the Mets. But luckily, they got the job done early. Starling Marte, got to note him as well. A massive 3-run homer in the 6th inning of Game 2 that ended up being the difference in that game. That's his 4th home run of the year. And to see Marte continue to just show that last year was a fluke, flush it from your memory. That wasn't him. He is way closer to being the 2022 Starling Marte, which is huge because even if they get some semblance of what they saw last year, a hurt player in the final year of this contract, if across a 4-year deal, you get 2 great years out of Starling Marte, that's money well spent. And he really has been huge for this team. And the fact that he can be your starting right fielder when JD Martinez comes back, you don't have to worry about it. And yeah, you can give him a day here and there to get a DJ Stewart into a game or to get a Tyrone Taylor into the game. The Mets are going to have kind of a real crunch in that outfield to try to figure out playing time for these guys, but they'll do it. They can give JD Martinez a day too when he eventually comes back. But the thing is, Marte has just really solidified the top of that lineup back in the 2-hole, contributing 4 for 12 in this series, 6 RBIs, 4 runs scored, 2 stolen bases. Between him and Lindor, you just had a consistent threat atop that lineup. When you're going up against a team that bats Ohtani and Freeman in those 2 spots, it was huge for the Mets to get that type of production from their 2 and 3 spots, and they did. And I also should note, I hate to say I called it, but it just scared me seeing Freddie Freeman with the OPS in the 700s going into the series, and he did have a great series against the Mets. No surprise there. Now, going back to Game 2, the Mets' second victory in this series, Drew Smith gave up a couple of inherited runs from Michael Tonkin. I feel like Smith leads the league in that category there. He gives up a lot of inherited runs. That could just be my eye test, but I feel like when you look through a box score, it just seems like, oh, Smith, no earned. And then you look back, oh, he was on the mound when kind of a couple of those runs came in. Just happens a lot, it seems like, with Smith. That's why I don't think that he's quite in that same level of trust as, of course, Adam Ottavino, Brooks Raley, who the Mets just lost. We'll talk about that more again in the next segment here. And, of course, Edwin Diaz and Reed Garrett. I mean, Reed Garrett's way ahead of Smith at this point when it comes to that inner circle of trust. And he got the save in this one because Edwin Diaz came in the 8th inning. Looking through this game, I love how Carlos Mendoza managed it. He got 4 big outs from Jorge Lopez. In those innings, they're 7th leading into the 8th. Got 1 out from him in the 8th. And once he walked Mookie Betts and it came to Ohtani and Freeman, Carlos Mendoza didn't mess around. He went to Edwin Diaz. The funny thing is, Edwin walked both of those guys, but he was pitching carefully to avoid the big home run or the big hit. And then he got a couple strikeouts and stranded the bases loaded, which is a huge, huge confidence booster, I feel, for Edwin. Not that he doesn't have confidence, but he's a guy that still has to trust his body and still has to pitch in big spots, and it's been a long time. So in that moment, in that series against a really good team, to navigate all of that and to not be scared to walk some guys and to pitch with runners on base, knowing he can get big strikeouts when he needs to, really, really encouraging signs from Edwin Diaz. And then to be able to have a Reed Garrett now, who you can put into the 9th inning after using Edwin in the 8th, and he strikes out the side in his first save situation. It's really just ridiculous what Garrett's doing here. And it gives the Mets another high leverage arm. Now he's as important to this bullpen as anybody. And it's crazy because he didn't even start the season with the club, or at least the regular season, I should say. Now, like I said, the Mets get beat up real bad in this final game. It's okay. You win the first 2, you win the series. No shame in it. But I think the Mets really had to start asking some tough questions about Adrian Hauser, particularly with the guy that we talked about on the opening of the 3-part prospect episode that I did with Arm Layton, Christian Scott, who is MLB ready. So when do you make that move? How long is Alvarez going to be out? What's the deal with Brooks Raley and JD Martinez? A lot of injury notes and things to discuss when it comes to the roster management. So we'll get to all of that in just a minute. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience are what brings home the winning trophy. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. Over 122 million parts to choose from for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. With eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. All the parts you need, the prices you want. It's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Today's episode is also brought to you by Monopoly Go. I've been told I'm a competitive person, and I'll tell you what, my competitive side, it loves me some Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. You can, similar to the classic Monopoly, charge your friends rent on your iconic properties, or now with Monopoly Go, you can actually rob their vaults of their riches and take them for yourself. The leaderboards show you who is the biggest Monopoly tycoon. And for me, it's not just my competitive side. It is fun to team up with friends and people just all around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or Google Play. So Sunday was a very bad start for Adrian Hauser. His worst in the Mets uniform. He gave up 8 runs on 7 hits, walked 4, only had 3 strikeouts, didn't get through 5 innings. So it just another rough outing for Hauser. And there's going to be, and I think it's already starting, a push amongst fans and a curiosity as to how long do you keep Hauser in the rotation? When do you consider going to Christian Scott? Even to a lesser extent, Joey Lucchesi, who is in Syracuse and is on the 40, pitching well down there, and very well could be a better option than Hauser in this rotation. So the Mets are going to have to make a decision here at some point. To Hauser's credit, he's had 2 pretty good starts. He's had 2 really bad starts, and those bad starts have come against the Braves and the Dodgers, arguably the best 2 lineups in all of baseball, or at least in the National League. Now, the Mets are 1-3 in Hauser's starts. They lost the game against the Brewers, where he pitched well. They won the game against the Pirates, where he pitched well. And then, like I said, they've lost these 2 games against the Braves and the Dodgers. If you look at the Mets schedule ahead, they got an off day Thursday this week. Then they have a stretch where they play 13 games in 13 days. They have an off day. Then play 13 games in 13 days. They have an off day. And then 14 games in 14 days. The point being, this is the last time for a while where they'd have off days in consecutive weeks. The schedule going to ramp up a little bit here, and then eventually they will go and they'll play in London in the beginning of June, which will be a time of rest, but also a weird time with travel and everything else. But my point being, as you get to, after the off day on Thursday, the next, 40 games, you're going to have 2 off days in the span of 40 days, 40 games, or I guess 42 days, 40 games. And that's looking at primarily May. The Mets could employ a 6-man rotation at that point. They could have Adrian Hauser in a swingman role. They could call up Christian Scott and see what they have in the kid. And instead of having a Michael Tonkin on the roster, you just have Adrian Hauser in that bullpen. You have him in the Trevor Williams-esque role, more stretched out though, so you could go to a 6-man rotation at times. If you need Hauser out of the pen, you burn him, you figure things out later. The Mets can really play with things. Christian Scott is maybe a guy that want to only pitch once a week, so you'd have to really try to manage it. But to me, this would be the time to do it. You have an off day. The next time Hauser's up, I would say, hey, we're going to actually start Christian Scott there. And then you have Hauser available in the bullpen, maybe in the final game of that Giants series, this one coming up here, if you need an arm. or throughout the next series, and eventually he'll slot in at some point, or he'll just be out of the pen. But Christian Scott's MLB ready. We talked about it at length. Arm and I did on that show that you guys were able to watch on Friday, the part of the 3-part prospect show. To me, see what you got there, because there's a chance that Christian Scott comes up and he fails a little bit. If he does, that's fine. You send him down AAA, no harm, no foul. But there's a chance that he thrives. And if Christian Scott has only 120 innings this year, in my opinion, why waste too many of them in AAA? He can be a bridge right now to Kodai Senga. And there could be a time where you keep Senga and Scott in the same rotation, that make it a 6-man rotation. Eventually, maybe that's when Hauser would get a DFA down the line. But you could sort of go 6-man, pseudo 6-man right now with, have Hauser in more of a swingman role. And then if Christian Scott's throwing the ball well, Jose Abudo's still throwing the ball well, you have a healthy and productive Minaya, Quintana, and Severino. Senga slides in. There's your 6-man rotation. And, if at that point you can't carry Hauser anymore, you DFA him, you would still have potentially David Peterson, Tyler McGill, Joey Lucchesi, who all could be in AAA, conceivably as further rotation depth. The Mets really do have a lot of arms at their disposal. And because of that, you could just say, hey, keep Scott in the minor leagues all year, let him develop. But if you have a pitcher that's MLB ready, that has a fastball that will thrive in the big leagues right now, who could help you win games instead of throwing out Adrian Hauser in some of these starts where he's getting destroyed, you got to consider it, because this is a good Mets team. This is a Mets team that can make a playoff run. And with that in mind, you should have the best possible players on your roster. So my hope is the Mets would consider at some point going to Christian Scott. And though I will say, if they give Hauser one more turn in the rotation, I wouldn't be mad at that either, considering, again, his 2 clunkers have come against the Braves and the Dodgers. Now, let's go through the injuries. Brooks Raley, elbow inflammation. They said he was just struggling to recover from starts. Luckily, nothing came up in the MRI. So, in that sense, clean bill of health, but he's just going to have to rest, let his arm recover, ramp up. They think it's going to be 2 weeks, but these things can linger because then he's got a rehab potentially. So we'll see, which it's unfortunate because Raley's thrown the ball really well this year. The combination of Raley, Ottavino, Diaz, and Garrett has just given the Mets a ton of great options at the end of games. So it's going to be a tough loss. You're left with just Jake Diekman as the only lefty in that bullpen right now. Grant Hartwig came up to replace Raley, although I would imagine that we're going to see Sean Reed-Foley take that spot in the bullpen soon, a guy that has been striking out a ton of batters between spring training and rehab, who could fill another role at the end of the bullpen as far as a back-end late-inning reliever. Not that he would be in the option A group. That's still, of course, going to be Diaz, Ottavino. Now Garrett, I think, is probably kind of your 7, 8, 9 in some capacity. But Sean Reed-Foley, as far as being in that class with Drew Smith and Jake Diekman and Jorge Lopez that you still have to trust in games, I think he can do that. And so I'd imagine we see that very soon. We're going to end on Alvarez, so we'll now go on a rehab assignment, which is JD Martinez. Is it a rehab? Is it just a ramp up? Whatever you want to call it. The cortisone shot seemed to work wonders because he was playing in a game on Sunday, which is earlier than I expected. The last time I talked about JD Martinez, I said maybe get some live at-bats in St. Lucie. Well, they put him right into a game, live at-bats. And he went 2 for 3, scorched a double, and now his rehab moves to Syracuse. Now, I thought it'd be Brooklyn because I just thought have him in the city, close to the Mets, made some sense. Instead, they're putting him in AAA with the best competition, which is even better, right? Get him ready for the show as quickly as you can. The Mets are optimistic he'll be back on Friday. So all things have gone well. I said best case scenario, he'd be back for that series against the Cardinals. And right now, because that shot seemed to work really well, best case scenario might come true. So we got to see how he holds up in Syracuse this week, playing on Tuesday and Wednesday. Then he had Thursday off to travel, meet the Mets in New York, be there for Friday's game. And that's going to lead to a lot of interesting decisions on how you manage this team. I touched on it a bit last segment, but how do you still get DJ Stewart at bats? Because he's been one of your most effective players at this point. He's been really good. He's drawing a ton of walks. His OPS is really high. And he's one of your power bats. So maybe DJ Stewart's got to play some left field, which means Nimmo's got to play some center with Marte and right. You're going to see that a little bit. Does it become a Stewart-Bader platoon? Problem there, Bader's playing really well and Taylor's played well. So it's a good problem to have where the Mets could get a guy in JD Martinez who is, as far as career track record, their best hitter. Granted, Brandon Nimmo, Pete Alonso, there's a lot of guys that would probably be better this year, could be better this year, but JD Martinez, again, with career track record and based on what he did last season, he's coming off the best offensive season of anybody. The fact that you get that guy back and now you're kind of frustrated in the sense that some guys who are off to great starts have to see their playing time taper off. It's going to be really fascinating how they mix all those pieces. Mendoza going to have a tough job trying to feed everybody at bats, but they'll figure it out. And again, it's a good problem to have. I imagine the Mets will be pretty aggressive using their benching games too, really playing into matchups late. I don't think you're going to pinch hit for JD Martinez much, but there might be a situation where Bader starts against a lefty and then a righty comes out of the bullpen. You go to DJ Stewart, and you could always then replace DJ Stewart with Tyrone Taylor for defense. So the bench is going to get a lot better here soon. The problem is the starting lineup took a huge hit, and I've waited up until this point to talk about the big downer of the weekend, which is Francisco Alvarez tearing a ligament in his thumb. And, I see the story, right? Alvarez out. And then I finally got around to watching a highlight of the play. It's kind of crazy. He tore his ligament on that. He was, trying to run out a number that he hit. There's an error thrown by the pitcher. I believe it was the pitcher, but regardless, it's sealed over the first baseman's head. So Alvarez quickly turned to go to second, and he slipped, and he caught himself with his thumb. But again, even when I read this story, because I read this story before I saw the highlight, again, it seemed like it would have been a lot worse than what the video showed. The video, it was sort of innocuous. He just kind of placed his hand down, and obviously his thumb bent back, and he tore a ligament. I do wonder, it was that same hand, I believe, the left hand, that he went into second base kind of hard, trying to steal, and his thumb sort of bent back, and then he got hit in the hand. I just wonder if, that ligament had already been strained to a certain extent. He was playing through some things, and in that moment, it just kind of snapped. It's the same surgery that Brett Beatty got, I believe, that ended his 2022 season. So Beatty's sort of been coaching him through it. They say 6 weeks is the earliest potential return. So 6 weeks, that has him maybe coming back in June, early June at the absolute best. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if we didn't see Francisco Alvarez until July. And that's a great addition for you down the stretch. But it hurts right now. Alvarez, the funny thing about it is I think they miss his glove more than his bat. He had a great scorching start offensively, then he tapered off. But it's amazing to say it, but Francisco Alvarez is the Mets' best defensive catcher right now. He's definitely better than what we've seen from Omar Narvaez. Tomas Nido comes up to be the backup catcher, and obviously you're not sacrificing anything defensively when Nido's in there instead of Alvarez, or in this sense, Nido instead of Narvaez. Now your backup catcher is better defensively than it was, but Narvaez is going to be getting a lion's share of the playing time. I'm sure it'll be a strict platoon. Nido starting against lefties, Narvaez against righties. And Narvaez has to step up defensively because what we've seen this year, it hasn't been great. With that said, he is a veteran back there. I think he's good at managing the pitching staff. But as far as pitch framing, you want to see a little bit better from Narvaez from receiving. Controlling the running game, it's been really bad with Narvaez back there. Hasn't been great with Alvarez either. I think a lot of it has been the pitchers, but Narvaez, the throws have been bad. Alvarez, it's been bang plays where guys have just been coming in. So that's the concern to me. It's actually more about the defense than the offense. Not that Narvaez and Nido can produce the same way that Alvarez could at his best, but Alvarez wasn't hitting at his best right now. And I actually think that a platoon there, those two guys, I don't think they're going to kill you offensively. The thing that most concerns me is Narvaez's defense. But the funny thing is, last year, we thought we were going to get a full season of a Narvaez Nido platoon, and it became Alvarez and Nido for a little bit. And then when Narvaez came back, Nido ended up getting DFA'd and off the roster. Now Nido's back on the 40. We're seeing what we were supposed to see last year. And I don't think it's a horrible catching situation. I don't think the Mets need to react and make a trade or sign somebody or try to force up Kevin Parrott or anything nuts. These two guys are MLB veteran backstops. The pitching staff will be managed properly. You just lose some upside in Alvarez's bat, but hopefully with the guys that have already performed and JD Martinez being entered to the fold, you can make up for it. And we'll see that lineup, not the Martinez one, but this lineup with that Alvarez take on the Giants in this upcoming series here. I want to preview what lies ahead in just a minute. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL, and baseball's in full swing. FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. What are you waiting for? $150 in bonus bets guaranteed once you place a bet at FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Next up for the New York Mets in this West Coast swing is the San Francisco Giants, a 3-game series that starts late tonight. The Giants have not gotten off to a great start this season. They are 10-13. They just lost the series to the Diamondbacks, in which Game 1 was the largest margin of victory in the history of the Arizona Diamondbacks. I got that from that same ticker on ESPN when I was on the cruise and I was trying to find out the score of the Mets game. I saw, wow, 17-1. And a game that Blake Snell started, the Giants bullpen gave up 12 runs after Snell had allowed 5 early. So crazy that the bullpen gave up 12 runs in the last 3 innings. And that's been their big problem this year. Their bullpen has the second worst ERA in all of baseball at 5.56. Their offense has been middle of the pack. They're 17th in OPS, 18th in runs scored, 19th in home runs. So maybe slightly worse than middle of the pack. The ERA altogether of 4.88, fourth worst in baseball, only trails the Rockies in the National League. But again, that ERA, the biggest part of the problem for them has been their bullpen. So for the Mets over the next couple of days, you want to be grinding out at bats, driving up pitch counts, and hoping that you get into that bullpen early because that'd be a really good chance for the Mets to win some ball games here. Now, game 1 is going to be Keaton Winn versus Jose Quintana. Winn has a 4.09 ERA in 4 starts this year. A guy that might still have rookie status, honestly. Didn't pitch much last year. Batters are hitting .385 against his sinker this year, the .692 slug. His primary pitch is a split finger that has fared well. Batters hitting .182 against that with a .273 slug. He's throwing that about 40% of the time. Then he has a 4-seam and a sinker that throws about 20% each, and then a slider he mixes in. But not a guy that I think the Mets should have any issues with. If this lineup can keep on rolling against some of the pitchers that the Dodgers had that I think just have a little more upside, even a guy like Gavin Stone, I think has better stuff than a Keaton Winn. So I think the Mets can do very well here against Winn and Quintana. He's been great this year. You might not expect him to get deep into games, but give the Mets 5 really good innings, maybe 5 1/3, and then hand it off to the bullpen with a lead. That's been a good recipe for success for the Mets. And the bullpen is fairly rested. They only needed Tonkin and Hartwig after Hauser in the blowout on Sunday, so everybody got rest. Garrett, Diaz, Lopez, Drew Smith, they all had a day. Adam Ottavino and Jake Diekman each had 2 days. I think Sean Reed-Foley might be added to the fold for this series, so he would be another arm that would be rested. I imagine they're going to keep Tonkin, but he wouldn't be available. I don't believe in long relief for this one. So who knows? Maybe you keep Hartwig just pitch as well. So yeah, I would think it'll be Sean Reed-Foley. You just trust that Quintana is going to give you some length here. And maybe the Mets get off to a good start and they take game 1. Game 2 is the pitching matchup of the series. You got Luis Severino versus Logan Webb. Webb is one of the more underrated aces in baseball. It's going to be really tough for the Mets to score off of him. Hopefully they can get him out of the game after 5, ideally, if not 6, and try to score late on that Giants bullpen. Severino, this is a real shot here for it to show just how good he can be. Last time he started, really the last couple times, I've been really hyping up the upside of Severino and how I believe he is the Mets ace right now. So I'm excited to see him get this matchup against Logan Webb, the Giants ace. And then we'll see Blake Snell ourselves in game 3 of this series against Sean Manaea. Snell, 11.57 ERA through 3 starts. He's allowed 15 runs off 18 hits. He's not going to be that bad this year. He's due for a good start, so that could come against the Mets. But the Mets have a really good lineup against a left-hander to have their right-handed lineup go out there, and they certainly could pile on runs against Snell and keep this funk that he's in to start the year going beyond his fourth start here. And then Manaea, the Giants are familiar with him, so that's going to be an interesting challenge. He was with them all last year, so we'll see if Manaea can combat that and still go out there and put up a good start. I haven't seen him go deep in a while. It was his first start that he went 6, and he hasn't since then. So it'd be nice to get some length out of him, but the Mets will have an off day on Thursday, worst case scenario. So we'll see how they ultimately manage things, the bullpen and everything else. Is Sean Reed-Foley coming up? How does JD Martinez's rehab go this week? We'll be discussing all of that as well as recapping each game of this series. Back to your regularly scheduled programming for Locked On Mets. I'll have another show for you out early Tuesday morning, and I'll continue that throughout the rest of the week. I appreciate all of you who had to stand by without your typical Locked On Mets content over the weekend. Thank you to all of you who tuned into our 3-part prospects episode. It was a lot of fun to do that and to give you guys something while that exciting series with the Dodgers is going on. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. If you want to be part of our texting service, the Locked On Mets Insiders, you can find a link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, after your second listen today or a second watch, head over to YouTube to the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. Of course, we're talking about Locked On Sports Today with your local hosts from each team, your league-wide hosts from each league. You can find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.